Good evening, class. My name is Tiffany Andrade. Thank you for letting me share my study on social movements and what increases their success. I was born and raised in the lay Buddhist organization Soka Gakkai International. SGI promotes transforming society through peace, culture, and education. So at the beginning of this year, I had taken politics of social movements and was fascinated by the study and science of social movements. I applied what I learned to the SGI and their movement for peace, culture, and education. Through this, I realized I was a part of a huge social movement that was 12 million members strong and had local organizations in 192 countries and territories. After realizing how important the SGI movement was, not just for me, but for society and the world, I asked how a social movement increases their likelihood of success. Based on my previous classes, I knew success can be measured in many different ways and that the nature of social movements was complex and always changing based on the direction of society and the global community. So the first challenge was to define success for the purposes of this paper. Because of the complexity of social movements and the many variables that define success, I used the following 3 variables as a way to focus this paper. The likelihood of increasing a social movement's success will be measured as membership growth, formation of a social movement organization, and the ability to transform social standards while still reflecting the needs of society. The research question for this paper is simple. Which variables can increase the likelihood a social movement will be successful? The hypotheses for this paper are as follows. Number 1, a key indicator that a social movement is a success will be defined by its efforts to recruit members and sustain that growth in order to expand the movement's network locally and globally. Membership growth will ensure that resources are continuously available. Number 2, the formation of a social movement organization is another key indicator of success. A social movement organization creates opportunity for social movements to mobilize, track, promote, and implement strategies for protests and other demonstrations. Social movement organizations create sustainability and capacity to scale up as membership increases. Lastly, the social movement's philosophy and its ability to stay current with the times while reflecting the needs of society will increase its success due to its ability to keep members interested and engaged. My favorite parts of my research was the theoretical framework. And what I found was that George Herbert Mead's significant symbols to explain that the process of forming a social movement cannot occur without social interactions. So as individuals continue to interact with others, they expand their knowledge of self, others, and society, creating symbols in which individuals associate with their morals and values. Mead asserts that individuals and society are one side of the same coin. Society develops the individual, and the actions of individuals develop society. So this could suggest that individuals only develop a self and their knowledge of others, and society limited to their experiences. The theory of significant symbols applies to the recruitment process and why participants decide to commit to a social movement based on the values gained from the social movement's symbols and personal interactions with other members. Secondly, I found Max Weber's 3 types of authority are rational legal authority, traditional authority, and charismatic authority. Rational legal authority is seen mostly as bureaucratic authority because it is experienced in large organizations and corporations, distinguished by its hierarchy and defined rights and duties. Traditional authority is passed down from generations and is customary by nature. Lastly, charismatic authority, which applies most to this discussion of social movements because it defines a person who has extreme personal appeal. Charismatic leadership demands the attention of others due to their ability to bring forth trust, passion, and loyalty through their charisma. Like our professor, Ashley and Orenstein state, a charismatic leader who is most likely to emerge during a period of crisis will appear to have supernatural or superhuman power. The mission of such a leader is very often revolutionary. And this is similar to Martin Luther King Jr. or even Hitler. Finally, Neil Smelser's 6 factors for collective behavior is used to explain the stages of development for social movements as they react to rapid social change. The first, structural conduciveness. Number 2, structural strain. Number 3, generalized belief. Number 4, precipitating factors. Number 5, mobilization for action. And number 6, breakdown of social control. This is important when analyzing postmodern trends for social movements. As technology advances, the world becomes more connected and information is rapidly spread. If you're not excited already, I'm going to discuss the methodology for this paper, which includes an analysis of 3 studies. Study number 1 is based on the observations and interviews of women's centers conducted by Brown and Hosking. They determined that it was necessary to have 4 skills. Number 1, understanding threats and opportunities. Number 2, linking capacities and demands. Number 3, managing key dilemmas. And number 4, furthering values and interests. These 4 skills were necessary to create social organizations that promoted success of a social movement. The study conducted by Brown and Hosking was important to the discussion regarding the formation of social movement organizations because their study analyzed how the above skills create order, which enabled organizations to move forward. Study number 2 by Hank Johnston and Shun Liu identified several ways in which the study of collective behavior social movements can be restored to understand the challenges presented by postmodern social movements and globalization. Johnston and Liu's study supports the discussion for this paper regarding the importance of membership growth and staying current as means to increase the likelihood of success for a social movement. The last study, which was my favorite, by Maria Steffen and Erica Chenoweth, makes an effort to understand the gap between success from nonviolent versus the success from violent insurgencies by analyzing 323 nonviolent and violent campaigns. Additionally, their study compares their statistical data with historical case studies from Southeast Asia, namely the Philippines, Burma, and East Timor. Steffen's and Chenoweth's study were key to this paper's discussion regarding the importance of a social movement's philosophy to stay current with the trends of a society or global community such as nonviolence in order to be successful. The following are my findings for each of the hypotheses in this paper. Studies supported hypothesis number 1. The skills necessary to successfully organize a movement described by Brown and Hoskins are guidelines to networking, building relationships, managing relationships and dilemmas, and having effective influence. These skills cannot be acted out without membership and are not effective if they do not promote growth. Further, Brown and Hosking recognized that success is also measured by how readily transferable these skills are, suggesting that future generations will need to exemplify these same skills as membership grows. Skills cannot be transferred if there are no successors. In addition, the analysis conducted by Johnston and Liu recognized that even with postmodern social movements, membership growth is necessary to create awareness and popularity, increasing a social movement's visibility, which is key to a social movement success. Finally, while analyzing their case studies, Steffen and Chenoweth recognized that increased membership legitimized movements and encouraged global attention, as seen in their case study of the Philippines. Hypothesis number 2, that sustainability in the form of a social movement organization increases the likelihood of success for a social movement, was supported by the study conducted by Brown and Hoskins when they state, the art of constructing a social movement is something that requires considerable skill and experience. The key skills explained in their study were necessary to create order and encourage sustainability through organization. Studies supported hypothesis number 3, that change is manifested in society as a result of the social movement's objectives and the ability to reflect current needs of society will increase the likelihood of success. The study by Johnston and Liu described postmodern trends as increasing consumerism and affluence, individualism, demographic complexity, ideological diversity, global migration, and constant innovation in communications technology. Their study argues that that as social movements evolve based on these postmodern trends, it is increasingly important to understand those challenges through the revitalization of the study of collective behavior social movement. Social movements are made of individuals who interact and respond to social occurrences. As a result, social movements and how they organize, mobilize, and grow will need to be in unification with the current state of society. Further, the study conducted by Stefan and Chenoweth suggests that as globalization increases, social and political problems will have greater influence and effects, direct or indirect, on other countries and social systems. The results of their study show that nonviolent resistance is more successful than violent campaigns. The results of the several case studies examined by Stefan and Chenoweth showed that international support was more likely and timely for nonviolent campaigns. Overall, all three hypotheses were supported by the studies included in this paper. Membership, growth, and the different aspects associated with growth were proved to be necessary for a social movement's success and continuation. It was found that increased membership also increased awareness. The skills required to form and maintain a social movement organization became more important than the formation of a social movement organization in and of itself, as the transfer of these skills to future generations were crucial to sustaining the social movement. Lastly, the ability to stay current with trends and achieve objectives set by social movements were defining characteristics of success. Limitations for this study include not having an adequate amount of time to conduct thorough interviews of current activists or conducting surveys. In addition, this study was limited in the studies of international social movements. Recommendations for current social movements moving forward are to remain flexible to the needs of future generations, accepting new ideas regarding protests, demonstrations, and how to organize social movements based on political and social climates. Also, being aware of how a social movement's growth may cause stagnation or decline, as the symbols of a social movement may become fashionable or mainstream, taking away from their original objectives. Thank you again for letting me share.